Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Good. So we're recording today on Monday, September 20th, and you're going to be hearing this for the first time on Friday, September 24th. For our Canadian listeners, of course, today when we're recording this is actually election day here in Canada. Especially for you, I know we have quite a few American listeners, so our election cycle is a lot different than yours. Like our election cycle is like 36 days or something like that. It's like a really short one this time. So, but yeah, today is a really big day in Canada. And Caroline, I thought that it would be really fun for us to talk about something that we've never discussed on the show. We try and stay away from politics
Yeah.
on Overdue Finds, which I think is probably for the best, I think.
Mhm.
So today we thought, let's chat about, though, political thrillers, because with us being a library, we have a ton of political thrillers that you can borrow from us, and it's a genre that I enjoy. Caroline, I'm pretty sure you enjoy it as well, since we're talking about it today. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun episode. And not to, we're going to, I guess, not really poke fun at elections per se, but we're going to have some fun on today's episode looking at some of our personal favorite political thrillers. But, Caroline, I think with most political thrillers, there's like, I don't know. We're gonna get into this a little bit later on, but there's like conspiracies going on,
Oh, yeah.
and we kind of came across one when we were trying to set up this episode today, right?
Yeah, I don't want to alarm you, but I think we might be in our own possible thriller happening, and having this like recording element of it too is just kind of going along with this. We got to get the word out, because this would normally be where we introduce our guest. We're
Hmm.
lucky enough to have some great people joining us from the library, people we work with, people who are passionate about different topics. This week though, we don't have a guest because
Yeah,
no one seemed to want to come on and talk about political thrillers.
I know. Like, I totally feel like in most of political thriller like movies or whatever, there's always the scene where it's like, if you're hearing this, it
Yeah,
means I'm dead or I've been taken out or whatever. So I don't want to get all dramatic and everything, but
yeah.
yeah, I did find it was interesting. Like you had reached out to some friends of the show to see if they would like to come on and share their picks with everybody.
Easily a dozen people. Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people are like, "Hey, I would love to come back,
Hmm.
but
No one wanted to talk.
something's going on.
Yeah.
Somebody's being silenced. 12 people are being silenced, I think."
Oh, this is good. Like this practically writes itself
It
when
does.
we're, yeah. So we don't have a guest today. It's just you and me, but we'll be talking about political thrillers, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what your picks are. We're doing what another surprise reveal episode, and I always enjoy those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we also don't get to really record these too much where it's just me and you. I was looking back, and I think the last episode we did where it was just the two of us was our Netflix episode.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
yeah, it's always we've had lots of great guests lately, and yeah, it's always fun just the two of us sometimes to share our picks with each other.
Mhm.
But yeah, actually, and before we get into today's topic, a couple things we need to bring up. We've talked about this on the show before. In 2019, we were lucky enough to win a Canadian Podcast Award for Outstanding Branded Series. So, yeah, we had only been doing the podcast for about a year. We won this amazing award. Well, Caroline, it turns out a couple weeks ago, we actually won our second Canadian Podcast Award when we took home the award for Outstanding Artwork for a Series. So, yeah, Caroline, we've been doing this podcast for well, just over 3 years now. And yeah, we are now a two-time Canadian Podcast Award winner. So I was so thrilled to see that we had won. And I'm over the moon and really excited for, especially for our graphic design team here at EPL, who do such amazing work. And I just want to give a shout out to Craig Pinder, Gina King, Gabby Wong from our amazing design team here at EPL, who put together, most of the stuff obviously you see on our website and on social media, and especially too obviously the cover art you see for Overdue Finds. So big shout out to them, and also thank you to podcasters who voted for us to win that category. So that was quite a thrill.
I have really liked the cover art for the podcast, and I can say that because I liked it even before I was a part of the podcast. I thought it was really fun and spoke to what the show is. So, shout out to the graphic design team. They are fantastic to work with, so talented, and just do such amazing work at
Mhm.
EPL.
Caroline, before we get into our Overdue Finds picks, I want to remind our listeners that tickets for our next virtual Forward Thinking Speaker Series event are now available. Don't miss Terry O'Reilly, Customer Service is Marketing, on Wednesday, September the 29th. Terry O'Reilly is an award winning copywriter and marketer who has created campaigns for many top brands, including Pepsi, Goodyear, and Tim Hortons. His presentation will help individuals and companies create emotional connections with customers. There will be inspiring stories from around the world and examples of incredible and unexpected customer service ideas that you'll be able to implement immediately. Tickets are only $10 each and are available right now on epl.ca/speaker series. So, yeah, if you're new to the podcast or maybe you missed it, we actually interviewed Terry O'Reilly on our last episode. So, yeah, what did you think of that interview, Caroline?
It was so great to interview Terry O'Reilly. I know we had both been looking forward to it. Hearing his stories and his view of what customer service is and how it fits in with the role of marketing and the work that he's done. I I I loved going back and listening to it because I got to hear his stories again. So if you haven't checked it out, please go back and listen to the Terry O'Reilly interview. I think people will really enjoy it.
All right, so let's move into our Overdue Finds picks. Caroline, we haven't actually had Overdue Finds picks for like a month and a half, it seems
It's been a
like. Yeah,
while.
just the way our episodes have
Yeah.
gone the last little bit. So I've got a big list of stuff that I'm looking forward to talking about here in upcoming episodes. But what can you share with listeners this week?
I also have a list that I'm looking forward to talking about and trying to map it out so that I add a little bit of diversity to the topic. So today we're talking about political thrillers. This might get a little dark. My pick for my overdue fine is the documentary Street Gang: How We Got to Sesame Street. So this is a documentary about the creation and early days of the TV show Sesame Street. We've talked on the show in the past. We did a whole episode about the Muppets. We really didn't get into talking about Sesame Street that much in that episode, so maybe we will in the future. But this documentary, based on the nonfiction book Street Gang by Michael Davis, such a great documentary, really looks at the role that certain individuals played in the early days of it, the way that it was really mapped out with education specialists who looked at the number of times you would have to repeat certain words in a sketch to have that educational impact on kids. The focus on, yes, skits or sketches needed to be funny and engaging, but what were they teaching? What was the purpose of them? How everything all fit together, the role of humans and the puppets and the Muppets and everything was just, I loved watching it. I feel like I learned so much about Sesame Street, which was definitely a part of my childhood. And really think that anyone who has that familiarity with Sesame Street, with the Muppets, looking to see more about television history, would really enjoy checking out Street Gang.
So I have to admit something. As of probably under 24 hours ago, that was also going to be my Overdue Finds pick. It was. I
Really?
changed it at the last minute, and but yeah, amazing documentary. I also watched it for the first time a couple of weeks ago. Right now, it's probably my favorite movie of 2021. One other thing too, I
Yeah.
thought was really interesting about the documentary as well. Today, a lot of times we'll talk about like inclusion and diversity and that sort of thing, and I don't want to say Sesame Street was the first show ever to really think about that, but it seemed like they kind of were, like they wanted to make sure that a lot of different backgrounds and people of color were represented on the show, and seen living together, and just being friends and neighbors and all of that other stuff. So yeah, it was just a really amazing, heartwarming documentary.
Yeah, and it covers so many different elements of it, the puppeteering
Mhm.
side, the music
Yeah.
development side, hearing about how the songs, many of them I still sing from hearing them in my childhood. Everything from getting sued by the Beatles for a parody cover of it. I had to go look up the backstory of that one after watching the documentary. Just really interesting look at the people, the creativity, the vision that shaped what Sesame Street became.
Yeah, I can't recommend it enough as well. So that was going to be my overdue fine pick on our next episode, but I will.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. So,
Maybe we should have cleared these ones with each other. We had talked about the political thrillers
yeah.
part, but who knew we were so aligned? Okay, so that was now we've agreed it's great. What is your overdue find for today?
Yeah, so unfortunately, last week we lost one of Canada's greatest comedians, and I might say probably the best Canadian stand-up comedian. And of course, I'm talking about Norm Macdonald. Most people will probably remember him from his days of anchoring Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. To this day, he is my all-time favorite anchor. Like if I'm making a ranking of anchors, Weekend Update anchors, Norm Macdonald will, to me, always be at the top of that list. Obviously, Canadian. He had such a dry wit and sense of humor, and yeah, unfortunately, we lost him after. It turned out to be a private 9-year battle with cancer. So yeah, today I just wanted to kind of highlight some of um, Norm Macdonald's comedy that you can actually borrow from us here at EPL. So on the weekend, actually, I watched one of his last stand-up specials, and it was in 2011, and it was called Me Doing Stand Up. I believe it was a Comedy Network special. And for those of you who subscribe to Crave, you can actually watch it on there. We don't have the stand up special on DVD, but you can actually stream that album through Hoopla. And so I can't recommend it enough. There's some great jokes in there. It is kind of interesting because he does talk about, like, not to sound morbid, he talks about actually dying in that stand-up special and everything, and it's got some good jokes, and is kind of looking at the lighter side of that. We also have another one of his specials that you can also stream, comedy albums that you can stream through Hoopla, called Ridiculous, and that one came out in 2006. And we also have his memoir, which I have not read, and I definitely want to, even more so now, called Based on a True Story. So, Caroline, I've been spending a lot of my free time on YouTube, just kind of browsing these amazing clips of Norm Macdonald from his best appearances, in my opinion, were when he was on Conan O'Brien, or else just even watching Weekend Update clips as well on YouTube. So, yeah, I mean, if you've never actually heard any of his stand-up specials, please go to Hoopla. There's 2 on there, and yeah, just enjoy it. And like I said, we're definitely going to miss, in my opinion, Canada's greatest stand-up comedian.
I saw Norm Macdonald perform stand up couple years ago now. It was at the U of A,
Mhm.
in the little theater in the student union building, and I was in the balcony, and it is one of the times in my life that I have laughed the hardest. I remember being there. It was while he was doing crowd work. So it wasn't even a bit that he was
Mhm.
doing. It was in the moment crowd work. I laughed so hard. I was legitimately worried I was going to give myself a heart attack because I just could not stop laughing. It was just this total out of body experience of it, and it was so funny and so, in the moment of it, and I've been thinking a lot about that, since hearing of his passing.
Yeah, I had a great opportunity to see him perform as well, probably a few years ago too. It was at the River Cree actually, and he had Chris Farley's brother. I think it's Kevin Farley, maybe.
Kevin, I think,
He
yeah.
actually opened for, Norm on that show, and, yeah, he think he was doing some work for what would be his 2013, last stand-up special, because I remember hearing some of the same jokes on there, but, yeah, I was so glad I got to see him, at least perform once anyway, but, yeah, and it's also been really kind of funny too, going back and watching these old clips from SNL, and the big one too circulating online was him playing Burt Reynolds on Celebrity Jeopardy. You know,
Yeah.
to this day, it's one of my all-time favorite SNL sketches with the giant cowboy hat and Turd Ferguson. It's so good.
It's so good. It's that sketch is on, it was on the Best of Will Ferrell documentary, and I know that, that's where I watched it over and over and over again and just loved it, and, having one of the tweets I saw was from the Jeopardy Twitter account, which was that Alex Trebek, who passed away, late last year, also like, really liked those sketches, the Celebrity Jeopardy
Mhm.
sketches, and just seeing it and seeing the people involved, whether it's a character or the actor who has now passed away, it's just it makes me glad that there is a way to revisit and relive some of these
Yeah,
memories.
absolutely. One other thing too, I just want to give a quick shout out to. We don't have it in our collection, but if you get a chance, go back and watch. I think it came out in 1998. He only did like a couple of movies, but check out Dirty Work. Basically, him and Artie Lang are in it, and they open up a revenge for hire business. The movie's directed by Bob Saget. At the time, it was not a big hit at all. It totally tanked at the box office, but it's definitely has a cult kind of following now. It's to this day is one of my all-time favorite comedies. Chris Farley has a cameo in it. Yeah, if you get a chance, go and find a copy somewhere and watch it. It's really good. Today we are talking about political thrillers. Caroline, when this topic came up and we were brainstorming episode ideas, what was the first thing that comes to mind when you think of political thrillers?
I tend to be a very visual thinker. I see images in my head, and so when we first started talking about political thrillers, in my head was a person, probably a man, in a trench coat, getting into a car, carrying a briefcase, speeding away, while in the background is a easily identifiable political landmark.
Yeah.
Maybe something from Washington, the Capitol building, Lincoln Memorial, something like that, but it's speed, it's intrigue, it's, trench coats. That's what I had in my head for political
Mhm.
thrillers, and more tangibly, I think I went to the '90s era of, mass market paperbacks that many of them had, uh, titles that were adjective, idea, noun, like absolute power
Yeah.
or, total betrayal, something
Yeah.
like that. Like, that's the type of thing that I think of when it comes to political thrillers.
Yeah, definitely. There has to be like conspiracies involved. Like
Mhm.
somebody's up to no good. And you're right. Like when I think of political thrillers, yeah, I totally think of like the man in the trench coat. They're meeting late at night in front of the Lincoln Memorial, maybe
Yeah.
swapping a briefcase or an envelope or something like that. We don't seem to really have a lot of like Canadian political thrillers. I think like I don't know why, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe listeners, if you know of any good Canadian political thrillers, email us at podcast@epl.ca. But yeah, there's and the stakes are always high. Like there's this could
Always.
lead to World War III or the overthrow of the government or something like that.
That's reading through it because of course I was like, "Okay, we're gonna talk about this. What are the rules?" And looked up the definition of political thriller, which is one that really makes sense. It's a thriller that is set in politics, has these government elements in it that the repercussions or the outcome are kind of happening on that national or global level. Because I there's a lot of overlap in some of these things between, you know, a legal thriller or a conspiracy thriller, um, and then sometimes there were ones that were classified as political thrillers, or when I say classified, somebody mentioned them. It's on a website somewhere. Um, and they were more politics than thriller.
Mhm,
One of the ones that came to mind for me was the movie The Ides of March, which starred Ryan Gosling as a junior campaign manager. George Clooney was a Democratic presidential nominee candidate. It there is there's machinations, there's jockeying for position, there's secrets and lies and everything happening, but I would say that one's more political than thriller.
mhm.
Sometimes that's what I'm in the mood for anyway.
You know, and like I said at the top of today's episode, these are some of like we're going to be sharing like our favorite picks. We're not saying that these are the best by any means, but yeah, and that's just it. Like, yeah, when I was kind of doing up my list, it can get. I've got one in particular here that people are gonna be like, "That's not a political thriller," but
Yeah.
the world it's set in, it kind of is in a way. So we're gonna have fun with this list, and yeah, we hope you enjoy our picks. So, Caroline, I'm gonna start with you.
Okay.
What's your first pick for your top political thrillers?
My top political thriller, by far, the one I knew without even Googling to see if it met the criteria, All the President's Men.
Mhm,
I love this story. I am more familiar with the 1976 movie. I have years ago read the 1974 book by Woodward and Bernstein about the investigation into Watergate and Nixon's involvement and his eventual resignation from the presidency. But the 1976 movie that stars Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, I just love this movie. It is such a good movie. It keeps the tension going during scenes of just the two of them scribbling names on notebooks. The soundtrack, more often than not, is just typewriters. I just love so much of what the movie does. It's it knowing that it's based on this true story, also knowing that they've taken some liberties with amalgamating characters. I think the fact that you don't see Catherine Graham in it is an interesting choice for the filmmakers. There aren't a lot of women in the movie, which is something that sticks with me as I'm watching it. But overall, the story, the actors, everything about All the President's Men, I just love.
yeah, we've got Deep Throat there. Like, there's so much of like that movie. Unfortunately have not had the opportunity to read the book. I would love to go back and read it. I do like Bob Woodward's work. I wrote a biography on kind of the last days of John Belushi back in the early '80s, just after he passed, and today it's one of my all-time favorites, and actually just read, I think it was Fear by Bob Woodward about President Trump last year. But yeah, so I definitely have to go and read it. But yeah, there's a lot happening kind of in that movie that, if you're looking at kind of almost like the stereotypes or some of the cliches with political thrillers, it all pretty much started with All the President's Men.
Yeah, watching some of the reporting scenes when they'll be in pitch meetings,
Mm,
like, there are scenes where it's just the newspaper editors going around the table and talking about what they're pitching to put on the cover or the do and, it's just looking at that era of what reporting was like, what the types of political stories were. Jason Robards as Ben Bradley is an incredible performance. Just so much of it, as you say, so many of the things that now we've come to expect from the movie. The telephone calls from mysterious people, the people using code names, going off the record, using tricks to get around being off the record. All of that, so much of that is present in All
mhm.
the President's Men.
And I, like you said, with it's almost like the music is like typewriters. And I do love those movies kind of set in the 70s and 80s, and where they show news, like newspaper, like newsrooms, and just the hectic frenzy of it and everything. And yeah, it's definitely takes you back anyway.
Yeah. So what do you have on your list?
Well, to me, when I'm thinking of political thrillers, to me, the one name that comes up automatically is Tom Clancy. If you are going by any bookstore or library in the 90s, there's a good chance there is a Tom Clancy book right at the front of the store or library. Doing a little bit of research on him, and Caroline, we could probably almost do like a whole episode on the works of Tom Clancy, because he wrote like 19 books, and there's like more books coming out every year kind of based on his characters through these different novels that he's created already. And there's like video games for his series Rainbow Siege was really popular a few years ago as well. But in particular, when I'm thinking of Tom Clancy, I'm thinking of the Jack Ryan series, or some people online like to call it the Ryan verse. So with the Jack Ryan series, so the first novel featuring Jack Ryan before it became a movie, of course, was The Hunt for Red October, which came out in 1984. And to date, there's actually been a total of 17 Jack Ryan novels. Like, there is a huge amount of them. Most people are actually aware, obviously, of the movies. So Hunt for Red October was the first one, where we had Alec Baldwin playing him. And then we had Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger, where Harrison Ford played Jack Ryan. And we had Some of All Fears with Ben Affleck, Shadow Recruit with Chris Pine, and now, of course, we have the Amazon Prime series starring John Krasinski. So Jack Ryan is this. For those of you who might not be familiar, he's a CIA operative, and as you go along with the books, he actually ends up becoming president. We don't see that in any of the movies at all, but he kind of works his way up, goes on different missions, and works behind the scenes for the CIA. So yeah, the Jack Ryan series and Tom Clancy novels in general, like Tom Clancy, as I mentioned, churned out so many books. But yeah, a lot of his books were really espionage thrillers set in the Cold War, but they all kind of had these political stakes where the White House was involved, the CIA is involved, and that sort of thing. So yeah, pretty much anything by Tom Clancy, or really the Ryanverse, Jack Ryan titles are great. If you're looking for the best Jack Ryan movie, though, I would go with The Hunt for Red October.
When you're describing that there are all of these books and all of these actors have played Jack Ryan, it was kind of analogous to James Bond in a way.
Yeah, a little bit. It's funny because I did have in my notes to maybe mention that it's almost like America's James Bond in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, earlier this year too, Amazon Prime, there was a movie out called Without Remorse, starring Michael B. Jordan. And off the top of my head, I do not remember that character's name, but he's also kind of like almost like an American James Bond as well. But for which movie is it? Oh, Clear and Present Danger. Most people will kind of remember from the trailer from that movie. There's a scene where Harrison Ford is arguing with the president of the United States, and he has to remind Jack Ryan or Harrison Ford that he is the president and what he says goes and everything. So, yeah, lots at stake in these movies, and yeah, they're fun throwback to the '90s.
There were definitely some eras that emerged in looking and doing a bit of research into political thrillers. There was the Cold War.
Hmm.
Well, there were multiple things, but like there was kind of like the post World War II era, the Cold War era, the 70s American politics era,
Hmm.
and then it almost really jumped to that 90s certain piece where there were all of these thrillers, conspiracy pieces that mapped across some of these different genres that really were prominent
Hmm.
in pop culture.
Yeah, like, I mean, you think about, like, how long either it takes, like, a book or a movie to come out, and, movies will stay in, like, kind of script development for quite a while, and, yeah, a lot of these were being written in the '80s, kinda during the height of the Cold War, so, yeah, it's not surprising in the, the early to mid '90s that we saw a lot of these, coming out as movies anyway during that time. So, Caroline, what's your second pick?
My next pick is another name, by another name that you would have seen on a lot of library shelves in the 90s and continue to today, and that is The Pelican Brief by John Grisham.
Mhm,
Definitely one where I wanted to have John Grisham on my list to talk about him, but many of his books skew towards legal thriller, which, while interesting, is really not what we're here to talk about today. But the Pelican Brief has that kind of American federal politics level involvement of it. When I went back and kind of re-looked at what was going on in the Pelican Brief, it in some ways um it's almost like a Mad Libs movie where uh, things are just kind of thrown together, but it always works out. And I mention movie, I'm probably at this point more familiar with the 1993 movie starring Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington than I am with the 1992 novel. But the book was John Grisham's third published novel after The Firm and A Time to Kill, and was really one of the ones that cemented him in this legal conspiracy thriller world.
mhm. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the book. I knew obviously it was a book before the movie, but yeah, definitely more familiar with the movie uh, as well. Yeah, it's kind of funny because you mentioned that, like, the whole legal thriller thing. Like, those were like big movies, or even just obviously big books as well. Like when they came out. Probably going through an airport in the '90s, probably all you saw on the shelves there would have been like John Grisham and Tom Clancy, Tom Clancy novels. Like even something like The Client was a huge movie that came out. Obviously, still based on a book, but yeah, it's like I said, most of his work definitely does kind of more skew towards the legal thriller side. But yeah, I totally forgot that the Pelican Brief is that is totally a political thriller.
It does. It opens kind of with the death, the murder of 2 Supreme Court judges, and then we kind of cut to, Darby Shaw, who's our protagonist, and she is a, ambitious law student who decides to look into this, creates a legal brief about the murders that ties the judges to this piece of land that is required for the continued development of an endangered pelican species, which is where it gets a little Mad Libs for me. But she ties it to this conspiracy because the judges were on opposite ends politically, but they had this shared um, uh, history of voting and or ruling along the lines of environmentalism. And so she shares this with her law professor, who she's also in a relationship with. And he's like, "Oh, this is really interesting. Let me show a few people." And then he dies. And then everyone who's seen the brief dies. So it has that element of like this almost cursed uh, object that when people come in contact with it, they're the next one who's marked for death. And so she is trying to figure out who to trust. Again, we have a journalist character. Again, the Washington Post. All of this uh, kind of playing out around who do you trust, who do you want involved with this, and how far will you go to make it happen. Just yeah, these were the books that like page turner
Mhm.
was invented as a description for. So I like it. I like the movie as well. So John Grisham, I definitely wanted to talk about him today.
Like Tom Clancy, we could probably just have a whole episode dedicated to John Grisham.
Yeah. Oh, what else is on your list?
You talk about a lot of these movies, kind of themes of conspiracies come up.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the biggest conspiracy theories of all time, of course, is who assassinated JFK.
Yeah.
So I, of course, have to talk about the 1991 Oliver Stone film, JFK. Um, Today, it is one of my all-time favorite Oliver Stone movies, probably second after Platoon. But if you're not familiar with the movie, this really is this is like an all-star cast of like 90s movies. So we have Kevin Costner, who is playing New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison. We have Tommy Lee Jones in it. We've got Joe Pesci, Kevin Bacon, John Candy is in it. But yeah, this is an incredible movie, and so really the movie is actually based on a book called Crossfire: The Plot That Killed Kennedy. And the movie itself has been criticized because it does kind of take a little bit more of a conspiracy theory approach to it than does like maybe actual facts. So basically Jim Garrison, of course, played by Kevin Costner, he files charges against New Orleans businessman Clay Shaw, who is played by Tommy Lee Jones, for his participation in what he says is an overall conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy. So, but the Warren Commission at the time, who was investigating the assassination, they came out and they were like, we've done all this research. And this was a big thing for the US at the time because there was a lot of like, can we even trust the government? So this Warren Commission was formed to really look into the assassination and kind of, people are saying, oh, the CIA is involved or these other, maybe the Cuban government or the mafia. But the Warren Commission, they were like, no, here's our report. It was Lee Harvey Oswald by himself. But yeah, Jim Garrison though was like, I think there's more to this story here. In the movie, they kind of hint at maybe President or his vice president Lyndon Johnson may have had something to do with it. So there's a lot going on in this movie, but it's definitely worth watching. And one of the things that is interesting about this movie too, Caroline, we were talking about at the beginning, some things that you normally see in political thrillers. And the first scene that I always think of is Kevin Costner sitting down with Donald Sutherland in this Washington, D.C. park. And yeah, I think you can see maybe the Lincoln Memorial in the background. And Donald Sutherland is this like deep state CIA op, and he's, telling him to follow the clues and all of this other stuff. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, the movie obviously does have, may not be that accurate with the facts, but this was a trial that actually did happen. Jim Garrison did kind of go after Clay Shaw and all this other stuff, and really did question the results of the Warren Commission's report. So yeah, this is it's an entertaining movie. We unfortunately, now we don't have it in our collection, but this does give me a chance to let everybody know that if we don't have something in our collection, you can actually suggest that we bring it in. So if you really want to see JFK, you can definitely do that. I did notice, though, we do have a documentary on Hoopla, and it is actually just based on that book called Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy. Look that up on Hoopla, and there is the documentary there if you're looking for a little bit more information on Jim Garrison and his case.
I almost had a complete subsection of my own making around the Kennedy family,
Yeah.
because there are so many political thriller, like true books that have been written. They've been characters in political fiction. Uh, they've been the subject of movies, many of them in this kind of conspiracy thriller angle. 13 Days
Mm,
with the Cuban Missile Crisis, Chappaquiddick, which came out a couple years ago, which again, to my mind, veers a little bit more to political than thriller,
mhm,
but still very interesting to see what can happen when people's lives get wrapped up in this political world or the political engine. Um, JFK, the movie,
mhm.
as you mentioned, just really interesting movies.
I'm glad you brought up 13 Days, because had I thought about it, I probably would have replaced JFK actually with 13 Days. Obviously, about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that's one that obviously the stakes in that one were life and death. Like, I mean, to think that, they were on the brink of World War III in like 1962 is absolutely crazy. So, yeah, and also Kevin Costner's in that movie as well. So, yeah, if you get a chance, that's another one. Definitely find a copy and watch it. So, what else for you, Caroline?
Well, this one is perhaps my most controversial pick, the one where there are multiple Reddit threads debating whether or not you can actually call this a political thriller or not. Um, Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going with this as a hybrid action political
I
thriller.
think it is, actually. I just rewatched it a little while ago. Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, first of all, you've got Robert Redford.
Hmm.
So, just like you mentioned Kevin Costner, Tommy Lee Jones shows up in a number of political thriller type movies, legal thrillers. Robert Redford, if he's in your movie, there's a good chance it might be a political thriller.
Yeah.
And he's playing against type in this movie. That's, I think, all I'm gonna say about that. I can't remember what's supposed to be a surprise and what's not supposed
Yeah.
to be a surprise. But, I mean, you got Samuel L. Jackson being, like, the target of an assassination attempt. You've got a mysterious, uh, uh, group infiltrating, American government, American intelligence, forces. You've got, brainwashing, all of these things, elements of who can you trust, being on the run, trying to stop something catastrophic from happening, and then by doing so, creating something that's kind of catastrophic in its own right, but for the side of uh, political rightness. In that case, you've got the technology to, make you hidden in plain sight. You've got Chris Evans riding around on a motorcycle. Like, there's just, what more do you want from a political thriller?
That whole, really, you could take a look at that Captain America series. starting with the first Avenger and kind of leading through Civil War. And all three of those movies, I think you could almost classify as like political thriller. Not so much maybe the first one, but definitely the third one as well, because, you know, you have the governments involved and they're wanting to kind of regulate kind of superheroes, if you will. And yeah, I totally think those are political thrillers.
That's my hot take, I
Mm,
guess. My controversial take on the definition of this. What I love about, I mean, we've talked in the past about the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
mhm,
and by the time they're up to having so many different movies, they've branched out with directors, with writers. It's not just a factory where they make the same movie 20 times. You've got Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which skews more towards this political action. You've got the first Captain America: The First Avenger, which is pretty much just like a straight up war movie, you know, like a World War II war movie. Um, Ant-Man is more comedic, Black Panther is doing different things. Like, all of these movies can be different things and exist in the same universe and play well when the characters come together. So, um, just doing some interesting things and having something like a big budget popcorn movie, comic book movie, having these thought, I mean, this is, you know, secret identities, code words. This is not new to comics, but being able to tie into some of the other elements, I think really made for an interesting story.
mhm. No, that's a good pick.
Yeah.
So my final pick also is going to be a controversial one because
Love it.
people will be like, when they hear this, they're going to be like, Bryce, that isn't a political thriller. But my pick is a comedy, and I'm going with the 1999 film Election, starring Matthew Broderick and a young Reese Witherspoon. So this movie, and actually, I believe I read somewhere, this is actually Barack Obama's like favorite movie about politics. It's
Really?
yes, absolutely. So those of you who might not be familiar with Election, so the movie basically takes place. There's a high school election for class president, and it looks like a student by the name of Tracy Flick, played by Reese Witherspoon, is going to win unopposed. However, there's a teacher, played by Matthew Broderick, who has other plans. He convinces this high school football player, a really popular guy in school, the most popular guy in school, Paul Meltzer, played by Chris Klein, who ended up being his first movie, to run against Tracy Flick. Tracy Flick is this kind of like, I think everybody kind of went to high school with a Tracy Flick. Like, she was just an amazing student, but was like involved with like pretty much every extracurricular activity, like yearbook and you know, student council and all this other stuff. So Matthew Broderick's character cannot stand Tracy Flick, and the idea of him having to spend like a whole year working along with Tracy Flick on all these different student council campaigns just absolutely drives him nuts. There's several reasons why, one of which I will not talk about on this podcast, and you'll have to watch it. But yeah, this movie is also just a perfect example of a dark comedy. I think this is like one of the darkest comedies you can watch. And yeah, there's kind of a lot of intrigue and kind of conspiracy going on, because we've got Tracy Flick who's running, but her presidential posters, I guess, elect Tracy Flick, they're torn down and thrown out, and there's all these, you know, who did it, and did Tracy set herself up, and all this other stuff. So there's a lot going on with the movie Election, and if you haven't watched it before, or maybe it's been a while since it came out that you first seen it, and go back and watch this movie, because I watched it again for the first time in like, I don't know, like years. Like I remember seeing this in the theater, and this holds up and it's an amazing comedy and kind of a lighter look at politics. And it doesn't take place in the US government, but it takes place in student council, and I think you'll have some fun with it in this election season that we're currently in.
I think there is something that about having it set in something that's more accessible. I think most people, whether Canadian or American, will be closer to a like high school student council
Mhm.
election than someone actually running for higher office, like the president or prime minister. So there is that element of familiarity, and as you were talking, it made me wonder what a like a like a town council, like small town mayor race might look
Yeah.
like, but, like, shot like a political thriller around this, like, either totally straight or, like, mockumentary style. I don't know, I think there's some area there to play with that idea.
Yeah. I also want to quickly mention too, this movie has a fantastic ending, but there was actually an alternate ending which you can find on YouTube. It was one of the DVD extras, and when you watch this alternate ending, you will be glad that they stuck with the one that they did. So it would have totally, in my opinion, if they had used the original ending, it would have ruined the whole movie. So kudos to director Alexander Payne for keeping his vision there, because it's great.
Before we wrap up our discussion of political thrillers, I did want to make a mention of one that was new to me when I was doing my research, and so I've taken it out of the library. I've checked it out. I've started reading it. The President is Missing by Bill Clinton
Yes.
and James Patterson. I'm very curious to know what this is like. I tried reading the summary on Wikipedia, and that confused me. So I'm not sure how well I'll be able to follow the plot. But there is something about a former president writing about a fictional president that I'm kind of intrigued by, and it makes sense to me why the publishers might have gone this route.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when that book came out. I think they may have also just maybe released a second one as well.
Yes, The President's Daughter, which is a standalone
Mm,
non-continuation, if I understand
yeah.
that correctly.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I guess like what better person to write a political thriller than a former president? Like he would know kind of the
Right?
inner workings of the White House and some of the Secret Service stuff. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, so I've got that checked out right now. I'm taking a look at it. Not yet making my list of top picks, but maybe when I'm done, we'll have to see where it lands.
Just a couple honorable mentions as well I had on my list, just in case we had any duplicate picks here. The Manchurian Candidate. We've got it in the original
Yeah,
book from 1962 and in the movie with Frank Sinatra in it. There was also a
and
remake.
Angela
That's
Lansbury.
right. Angela Lansbury's in it as well. So, and Zero Dark 30 about the hunt for Osama bin Laden is also a really good one.
So moving into our quick roundtable questions today, I guess we'll start with which fictional politician's novel would you most like to read?
It's funny because in my notes you mentioned Mayor Quimby.
Yes,
And
when I sent you this question, it was which fictional politician's novel would you most like to read, and why is it Mayor Quimby from The
yeah,
Simpsons?
actually, it is not Mayor Quimby. I have a feeling his biography would be very Kennedy-esque, talking about parties with Freddie Quimby at the Quimby compound. I
Hmm.
actually went with. Did you ever, Caroline? Did you ever see the movie Idiocracy?
No.
So it's a Mike Judge movie. It's about this guy who is frozen and woken up in the future. And unfortunately, in the future, everybody's like really dumb and everything. And it is basically like everywhere is like a Mountain Dew commercial. So it's a really funny movie. But in that movie, The president of the United States is played by Terry Crews, and the character's name is Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho. So basically, he's the president of the United States. He's also a former pro wrestler, an adult film star. He delivers these over the top, vulgar speeches when he addresses the nation. And he gets everybody's attention by shooting a machine gun into the air. So I think President Camacho would have a pretty interesting biography. So I would check that one out. How about you?
Mhm. My first thought on this was maybe President Bartlett from The West
Mm.
Wing. I could see him doing something with maybe like a pen name because he's a very articulate guy, well educated. But even if he had a pen name, I couldn't see him really crafting something like a memorable thriller type thing, the kind that like you just want to like the page turner
Mhm.
type. So I thought about other perhaps American presidents, and where I landed was Dave from the movie
Oh,
Dave.
yeah.
Uh, and I think that he, in the movie, I don't think we find out if he is a talented writer or not, but his ability in mimicry and being able to convincingly portray his lookalike, the president of the United States. I think that could lend itself well to a nice, well-crafted thriller. So I'm gonna hope that Dave from the movie Dave writes a book
Yeah,
in the future.
that would be good.
Yeah. And our last question: if you were going to write a political thriller set in Edmonton, what would you call it?
I really struggled with this question, and I was sitting here last night, and I'm like, what would it be about? Who would be involved? So, I was trying to think of a topic that divides a lot of people, and the one that came to me was bike lanes. It has to involve bike lanes because people are very divided on this topic when they really
Yeah.
shouldn't be. So I thought my book would be called, and also too, if we're dealing with Edmonton, we have to have Yeg in it. Like it's
Hmm.
guaranteed. So my title of this political thriller set in Edmonton would be called Yeg Lanes. And maybe it would involve the backstory of bike lanes and that sort of thing. So that's where I'm going with on my political thriller.
Love it.
Yeah. How about you?
Mine, I don't really know what the story is going to be fully about. I just kind of have the first scene, which is the sun comes up. It's a beautiful day. The commute is going well for people when all of a sudden the news organizations start to report that there's something mysterious that they've found on a certain piece of public art in Edmonton.
Mm.
Maybe some blood, maybe a body, maybe a briefcase. Who knows what it is? But this book is going to be called No Way Dome. And it's going to be about a mystery set around the Talus Dome.
Yeah. As somebody who lives actually not that far away from the Talus Dome, that's yeah, I would read that book in a heartbeat.
Yeah, but I can also see like a picture of like it and then like I don't know, pages blowing in the breeze
Oh,
or a
totally.
briefcase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it starts off with maybe there's because there's a path that leads up there. So there's
Hmm.
like a morning jogger and just
Yes.
minding their own business, and
Yeah.
oh my god,
Maybe they
this
have a dog.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god, the discovery there. So
Yeah. See, I think this is good that you've got it. You've got scenes set in various parts around Edmonton, so replacing the Lincoln Memorial with various Edmonton
yeah.
sites. So
Yeah.
I think huge potential for both of these
Yeah, I
stories.
think we should totally quit our day jobs and go into the world of Edmonton political thrillers.
So if anyone's interested in hearing more about those, hit us up.
That's right.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure that you're subscribed so that you automatically get all of our new episodes. And you can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews. And as always, if you like what you hear, tell a friend about the show.
We had some fun today chatting about political thrillers, but it's also important to know that we, of course, have an upcoming municipal election here in Edmonton, and you can learn more about it by visiting epl.ca/vote 2021. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.